All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for the CEQA public scoping meeting for the proposed Urban Pesticides Water Quality Control Plan amendments. We'll refer to it as the Urban Pesticides Amendments Project. Before we get started, emergency exits are out the back, down the stairs, and out the doors, the front doors, and then we meet at Cesar Chavez Park, which is just over here. And then once the all clear is given, we'll come back to this room. Bathrooms are on the far wall to my left, or out the back doors and to the left. If you haven't signed in, please do so. And I'd like to introduce the team from the water boards. We have Paul Hahn, Tom Mumley, Annalisa Kihara, and then Noel Patterson and myself. And Noel and I will be tag teaming today's presentation. And so let's get started. The purpose of today's meeting is to introduce the public to the Urban Pesticides Amendment Project and receive input on the following: range of project actions, project alternatives, reasonably foreseeable methods of compliance, significant environmental impacts to be analyzed, cumulative impacts, mitigation measures to reduce environmental impacts, and inconsequential issues to eliminate from the detailed study. And we'll put this on during the comment period to remind you. So the presentation today, I'll go over the project background, who we are and why we're here, and I'll also go over the project purpose and the regulatory background, including CEQA process, which we're kicking off today. And then my colleague Noel will go over the project proposal and more specifics on what we are proposing, and then we'll have a comment period. So backing up, Noel and I work for the State Water Board for the Stormwater Planning Unit, and our job is to implement the Stormwater Strategy. The strategy was adopted in January of 2016, and so we're a little more than a year into it. There are 23 projects that are to be implemented in 3 phases over the next 10 years. The vision of the strategy is to see stormwater sustainably managed and utilized in California, and our mission is to advance the perspective that stormwater is a valuable resource. The strategy has 6 objectives, and they are to increase and improve those that are listed on this slide. The 23 projects fall under one of these objectives, and today we're talking about Objective 6, which is to increase and improve source control and pollution prevention. If you were to go to our website, you would find this project listed under Project 6A, establish a statewide framework for urban pesticide reductions. And the objective of this particular project is to establish a statewide source control effort for pesticides in urban stormwater. This map is a good visual that that the problem is statewide. The red dots are urban exceedances for 3 common pesticides in urban areas. There are 2 pyrethroids, and the other is fipronil with its degradants, and they are exceeding the US EPA aquatic life benchmarks. The purple area is what is considered urban areas by the 2010 census, and again, the red dots are the exceedances in those urban areas. So you can see that it's common to urban areas both in Northern California and Southern California, which is why the State Board believes that this is, or why it's justified that this is a statewide approach. So what is the problem? So pesticides in urban, how does pesticides get into urban runoff? Pesticides are applied by homeowners or businesses or professionals to structures and landscaping, and they can run off during storm events or over irrigation into our storm drains, which go directly into our receiving waters. And what a receiving water is it's a water body for which the wastewater or pollutants are discharged into. Here in Sacramento, 2 major receiving waters would be the Sacramento River or the American River. A little bit about the regulatory background for the California water boards. Noel and I work for the State Water Board, and there are 9 regional boards throughout California. The duty of the water boards is to protect water quality, and we gain our authority through the Federal Clean Water Act and the State Port of Cologne Water Quality Control Act. The way that we protect water quality is through water quality control plans, which include setting water quality objectives and an implementation plan for the protection of beneficial uses. Beneficial uses are the uses how we use the water bodies, and they can include drinking water, tribal uses, recreation, fishing, and others. A little bit more on the legal requirement. Both the Clean Water Act and the Port of Cologne require the State Board to develop water quality objectives. And when those objectives are not met, the water body is considered impaired. Water bodies that are impaired must be identified and addressed through a total maximum daily load, which includes a plan of implementation to achieve those water quality objectives. A little bit more on impaired water bodies. It's commonly known as the 303D list, and it gets its name from the Clean Water Act, Section 303D. This map was generated from our website, and it has been filtered to show only water bodies that are impaired for pesticides. Quick note, in the North Coast region, up at the top, when the North Coast identifies an impaired stream, the entire watershed is listed, so that's why there's a lot of purple up there. This is, again, from the 2010 assessment, and there are 798 listings for impaired waters due to pesticide, and each one of those, or group of listings, requires a TMDL or an equivalent action plan. This raises an opportunity for good and efficient governance, as this proposed project would address current and future urban impairments with a single statewide action. And another note on this is the 2010 assessment, and we would expect that as more data is assessed, that we would find more listings or more impairments due to pesticides. Regulatory alternatives. So here are there are several alternatives that the State Board could consider, and they range from setting numeric versus narrative targets. We could continue on a watershed by watershed basis addressing each impairment, or we could do a statewide action. And all of these different alternatives require various levels of effort, going back to the good and efficient governance. The regulatory alternative that we're here to discuss today is number one. Some of the benefits of this statewide plan amendments creating a TMDL equivalent implementation plan is that it would set a narrative toxicity targets due to pesticides. It would be efficient to create and implement, and it creates common ground for collaboration with pesticide regulators. And my colleague Noel will go into more details of what this alternative includes. But before that, CEQA. CEQA is the process that the state and local agencies do to consider environmental impacts of a proposed project. And this is considered a project because it would amend the implementation plan of an existing water quality control plan. And we are here to assess the impact that those amendments would have. CEQA offers an opportunity for the public to provide comment, and that's why we're here today. This is a general overview of the CEQA process, and the red arrow points to the step that we are at today, the very beginning, and my colleague Noel will have a timeline that she'll present for the rest, and I'd like to introduce her to tell you more about the project.
All right, thank you, Matt. So I'm going to go into more detail on the project and its primary components. The goal of this urban pesticide amendments project is twofold. One is to achieve water quality objectives for pesticides and pesticide-caused toxicity in urban receiving waters. And the second goal is a more proactive approach to prevent future impairments through a statewide program based on urban pesticide source control. The regulatory vehicle for this project, as Matt mentioned, will be amendments to the statewide water quality control plans. This would include the California Ocean Plan, number 1, and number 2, the California Inland Surface Waters, Enclosed Bays, and Estuaries Plan. The background work on this project has been conducted collaboratively with partner agencies and stakeholders. These include our sister agency, the California Department of Pesticide Regulation, the U.S. EPA, the California Stormwater Quality Association, or CASQA, and Teal the Bay, an environmental advocacy group. And each of these groups have lent pesticide expertise to form a core team, which has been conducting background work on our project components. This diagram illustrates the general approach we've taken to this project. We have 3 primary components. One is a pesticide regulatory coordination framework. 2, municipal stormwater permit requirements for pesticide source control. And 3, a coordinated monitoring program for pesticides and toxicity. And these three components will work together to inform amendments to the statewide water quality control plans. Here's a very general timeline outlining our approach. For the past year, we've been working to develop internal work group products that will inform the plan amendments. And then by the end of this summer, we plan to have drafted a staff report and draft policy language for source control of urban pesticides. And then throughout that time until spring of 2018, we'll take that draft policy through the public process and at that time propose it to the State Water Board for consideration of adoption. And now I'll go into more detail on each of the three project components, beginning with the Pesticide Regulatory Coordination Framework. So this framework will outline how the Water Board participates with pesticide regulators to help ensure protection of water quality from pesticides pollution, urban pesticides pollution. And the pesticide regulators are on the state level, the California Department of Pesticide Regulation, and on the federal level, the EPA Office of Pesticide Programs. And so this is a proactive approach on the Water Board side, recognizing that working with pesticide regulators is one of the most effective ways that we can help to prevent urban pesticides pollution. And I'm providing this diagram to illustrate the multiple legal mandates in play regarding urban pesticides water quality issues. On the Water Board side, the Water Board draws authority from the Clean Water Act and the Porter-Cologne Act to protect water quality. And DPR also draws state and federal authority to regulate pesticides, including pesticide impacts on water quality. So here we already have 4 legal mandates in play regarding pesticides water quality. And so we want to make sure that we're working effectively alongside DPR and EPA on shared water quality concerns for pesticide-caused toxicity. And so part of this will involve understanding and defining the abilities and limitations of each partner agency based on these legal mandates. Second, I'll go into our component on pesticide source control requirements for municipal or MS4 permittees. MS4 is an acronym, Municipal Separate Storm Sewer Systems, M and 4 S's, and that refers to the conveyances and storm drains most cities in California use to channel water out of their boundaries into the nearest receiving waters. And these stormwater discharges, as they're called, are regulated under regional and statewide MS4 permits by the Water Board. So our proposed MS4 source control measures would focus on implementation of integrated pest management, or IPM, on city properties and educational outreach to both residential and commercial applicators. An example we have here on the slide is the outreach program, Our Water, Our World. And to explain a little more what integrated pest management is, because this is an overarching strategy of the urban pesticide amendments, integrated pest management is an ecosystem-based long-term prevention strategy for pests. It minimizes risks to humans, the environment, and non-target organisms, and includes strategies such as biological control and habitat manipulation, and is informed by monitoring and set guidelines. And an example of this common to California would be control of ants in a home, for example. And so a normal pesticide approach to this problem could be spraying the perimeter of a building with insecticides, which, although effective, can cause pesticides to come off during storm events into the nearest receiving waters. And so an integrated pest management approach to ants would be to first understand the problem, and if that's food on countertops, then to clean off those countertops. That's an example of modifying cultural practices, or sealing up the cracks between counters would be an example of habitat manipulation. So that's integrated pest management in a nutshell. And here's the full list of proposed MS4 requirements that we're considering. These are all outlined in the CEQA scoping document. We've already covered integrated pest management and education and outreach programs. We're additionally considering encouragement of participation in the pesticide regulatory process. And this measure is being considered because some municipalities have already begun engaging in collective outreach to pesticide regulators on registration and reevaluation decisions with positive results. Additionally, would be limitation of dry weather runoff, including excess irrigation water, and pesticides and toxicity monitoring. And one alternative that the State Water Board is considering is whether full compliance with these requirements will constitute compliance with receiving water limitations for pesticides during the term of this permit. And that point is something that we invite feedback on after this meeting or in public comments. The last leg of the stool, so to speak, is the monitoring program for pesticides and toxicity monitoring. So we would be creating a framework for coordinated monitoring of pesticides and toxicity between the monitoring of the water boards, of the Department of Pesticide Regulation, and of permitted MS4s. And this would include an associated cost estimate of this overall program. We have several purposes for creating a monitoring coordination framework. One is consistency among MS4 monitoring programs. So currently the various MS4 pesticide and toxicity monitoring programs across the state haven't been designed collaboratively and don't necessarily work together to answer the same monitoring questions. Second would be better alignment of MS4 monitoring programs with agency programs, so that's water boards monitoring and Department of Pesticide Regulation monitoring, since they both already have strong pesticide and toxicity monitoring programs. MS4s could further support that. And third would be efficiency and cost of compliance. So presumably if we're working together up front to coordinate our monitoring, we'll have some consolidation and therefore improved costs for monitoring. And fourth would be database coordination. So that's referring to the databases of pesticide and toxicity data held by the water boards and by DPR. And one part of the monitoring coordination framework has been to propose collective monitoring goals, questions, and objectives for a question-driven monitoring program. And a question-driven monitoring program refers to the way monitoring is designed. So starting with the questions we seek to find from the data. In this case, that could be, what are our primary urban pesticides of concern and where are they coming from? And then monitoring would be designed in order to answer those questions. And we've done this in order to help all three programs, the water boards, DPR, and MS4s, to understand the programmatic and scientific drivers for each other's monitoring programs and to find common ground for coordinating our monitoring. So in summary, there's three primary components to this project: the pesticide regulatory coordination, the MS4 pesticide source control requirements, and the monitoring for pesticides and toxicity coordination. And where we are with our current status and next steps, we will continue working on our progress on the project components. We will soon begin drafting a staff report and amendment language. And if you would like to stay updated on this project through emails, you can sign up for our email listserv, waterboards/subscribe, and select the following options. Additionally, you can check out our website, waterboards.ca.gov/storms, where you can find detailed project information, the latest updates, how to contact the project managers, and how to get involved, including signing up for our listserv. And of course, we're here today with CEQA public scoping, so we're accepting public comments based on this presentation and our CEQA scoping document. These comments are due to us by the end of March 31st. They can be sent by email or to our clerk of the board, Janine Townsend, at the following address. And of course, we can accept oral comments today at the scoping meeting. And all this information is already online at our website on the public notice for this meeting, and we'll also be posting these slides. All right, Matt and I would like to thank you for listening to our presentation about the urban pesticide amendments. And at this time, we'll be accepting questions and input. Here's again that list of the categories of input that we're seeking to hear about in particular. And for our webcast audience, we'll be checking our inbox to answer your questions during the meeting. So please send your questions now to the following email, storms@waterboards.ca.gov. All right, thank you, everybody. We can accept questions now. Input, clarification, questions. Mm-hmm. You have anything?
So I have a question and then a sort of a comment.
Please. Mm-hmm.
The question is, since we're going to be kind of putting together a monitoring plan for the entire state, do you anticipate, because each region is different, and the listings from one area to the other could be different as well. How do you anticipate maybe kind of designing a monitoring plan that would kind of represent all areas? So that's more of a question. I'm not sure if you got into that phase yet. Mm-hmm. And the other one is, how do you anticipate the coordination with the regional boards to go in terms of, for us MS4 permittees with very specific requirements in our permits, how do you anticipate the coordination to go with each of the regional boards? I know that you posed the question about if an MS4 does all this, does that check the box on compliance? I think it's for us as MS4 agencies, the answer to that question is hugely important. So just thought to make that comment. Oh, yeah, and I'm Dalia with the City of Sacramento.
Mm-hmm. And sorry, can you repeat the last comment you said that about receiving compliance for fulfilling these objectives that, sorry, I didn't hear the part you said after that.
Yeah, so whether or not that would be considered compliance under our, each agency's MS4 permit for whether it's for putting together pesticide management plans, whether it's to check the box on the TMDL compliance. I think it would be great for us to kind of get a better understanding of that, and also ensure that the regional boards are part of that conversation. Maybe they already are. Sorry, it's my first meeting attending this, so I don't know. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I've got two questions from that and then sort of a comment. So first was the monitoring plan and how to account for regional differences. And you're correct, we're not at that point where we've started putting together the specific requirements on the monitoring plan. But as I described, one of the primary things we'll be seeking to do is answering these coordinated monitoring questions. So even with the accounting for regional differences will be just to answer the specific questions. And we have begun to incorporate regional board participation. From the beginning, we've had heavy participation from the San Francisco Bay Regional Board and the Central Valley Regional Board, and have gotten input from the LA Regional Board as well. And so part of this project is just making sure that we engage all of these regions. And so we've done that already through sort of broad updates, but then there's, of course, much more to do with more individual and more focused meetings on the monitoring specific aspect. So we understand that there's the importance of both these regional differences, but then have this overall goal of monitoring questions that will inform statewide decisions. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, no.
And let's see, the other part was, okay, you just had the comment on the deemed compliance. And was there a particular question you had within that?
No, be interested
Okay.
to know what the answer to that would be.
Okay.
It's good to know that the regional board has already included in conversations, and that hopefully that will pave the path for sports to kind of.
Correct, and we certainly are welcome to your input through comment letters on this meeting. Check the green light on your mic.
This is Tom Mumley. I'm Assistant Executive Officer at the San Francisco Bay Regional Board, and I'm called the executive sponsor for this project. And the important part of it is that it has relevance and support throughout by all the regions, and so that's a key part of our project. And as Noel said, we actually have had regional participation, and we're going to continue to engage. The intent here is to establish consistent requirements statewide in all municipal stormwater permits, so that ultimately we would strive to work together collaboratively on addressing urban pesticide issues at the appropriate scale. It doesn't mean it will totally. We aren't saying a priori we will totally supersede any region-specific needs or interests, but the goal is that we would avoid that unless founded. And relative to any existing permit requirements, by the very nature of this being established through statewide water quality management plans, they would drive future permits, and they also provide a cause to reopen as necessary. So all our permits have a reopener in them that allows them to be changed based on a statewide plan or new water quality standards, whatever, if necessary. Usually we don't do that unless there's a time critical issue or an unintended sort of compliance consequence. So I'm pretty confident that your concerns will not be a concern. This will all be a smooth transition, and for the greater good for the municipal level and the state level.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Dave Tamayo, and I'm with the County of Sacramento Stormwater Program. I'm also the co-chair of the CASQA Pesticide Subcommittee. And I wanted to express CASQA's overall support for the direction of this action. And in particular, we believe that the various elements that you've outlined are appropriate and very helpful to solving both pesticide toxicity issues and also the difficulties of MS4s in complying with pesticide problems or pesticide requirements in our permits. In particular, I wanted to say that we support the notion that pesticide regulatory authorities are very important for addressing the urban pesticide problems that are seen, and so the element that specifically recognizes that in what you've outlined here is very important to us. We think that the minimum measures that you've outlined for MS4 discharges are appropriate and doable. We also are very interested in supporting a monitoring program that's better coordinated and that helps us reduce our individual monitoring burdens, but in the end actually produces better and more usable data for managing pesticides. And finally, we very much support the notion of this plan hopefully supplanting the need to develop watershed by watershed TMDLs, and we think that that's a good element to include in this because it makes for much more efficient use of both state and local resources. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Dave.
So there's a question online. The question is, could you explain how the narrative toxicity targets would interact with any numeric toxicity targets for TMDLs and water quality objectives for pesticides?
And can you say who that question was from, Matt?
Jonathan Evans, Environmental Health Legal Director.
I believe for the Center for
Center.
Biological Diversity.
Yes.
Matt, can you reread the question again?
And there's two, but we'll start with this one. Could you explain how the narrative toxicity targets would interact with any numeric toxicity targets for TMDLs and water quality objectives for pesticides?
We'll have Paul Han addressing this question.
This is Paul Han. I'm the section chief with the Watersheds and Wetlands section. The Urban Pesticide Project is one of the projects within my sphere of authority. With regards to existing TMDLs that have numeric toxicity, I'm not aware of any that have numeric toxicity objectives. Tom, are you? I know that we have several that are done based on numeric pesticide levels of TMDLs, and those would need to be handled separately, and we'll have to address how those would be dealt with as we get further into the program. With regards to numeric toxicity targets within TMDLs, again, there's a couple of different ways that this could go. One way is that we could carve those out, or one way would be that the board could choose to supersede those within the basin plan, or there's a potential way that we could harmonize the two if it makes sense to do that. I think that answers the question.
Yeah, and there's a second part to it that I'll ask now. If the three legs of the program are being implemented, but water quality objectives are still exceeded, what steps would be required to meet water quality objectives for pesticides?
So the question, as I understand it, is if we actually adopt the proposal that has been identified here, once we've fleshed it out and run it through the public process, and if fully implemented it and we're still having pesticide-related toxicity, then we would need to reevaluate the program. We would definitely be looking at a potential revision. We would potentially continue to look at site-specific TMDLs. And certainly within the framework, we'd be talking about coordinated activities with DPR and EPA Office of Pesticides. I do want to flag that one of the important outcomes of this proposed procedures is to develop a better framework for working between the agencies to address these issues. But as far as specifics, that's the kind of thing that we'll have to flesh out as we continue to work through the process. Tom, did you want to say anything more about that? Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions in the room? Yeah.
This is Dave Tamayo again. I actually commenting sort of in relation to the online comment that came in. And one of the reasons that CASCA has been very supportive of this approach is that it recognizes the importance of coordination between the water boards and MS4 dischargers and the pesticide regulators. It recognizes that MS4 dischargers have no authority to control pesticide use by parties other than their own legal, than themselves. And then also it recognizes that there is very strong authority both in FIFRA and in the California Food and Agriculture Code for addressing water quality impacts, and sort of strengthens the expectation that, or strengthens the ability of the water boards and DPR and US EPA to work together to address those through existing pesticide regulations. Mm-hmm. So And the fact that this recognizes that formally is an important policy statement by the state, and we think that that will continue to move towards better outcomes for controlling pesticide use or pesticide impacts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Simon Val from Berkeley Economic Advising and Research. I was just wondering if you could potentially outline some of the costs and benefits of this project and who they may fall upon.
Those were the cost benefits?
Costs and potential benefits, and who they may fall upon.
Okay, yeah. So I'll start with the monitoring coordination part of this project. And so currently there are pesticides and toxicity monitoring requirements in MS4s that aren't trivial. And so we're expecting that this project will be an improved coordination of monitoring efforts. So it's not necessarily an increased amount of monitoring, but better designed and planned, and hopefully some consolidation as well. So we're not expecting a heavily increased burden in that sense. In regards to the MS4 requirements, the requirements that we've listed are already in some form in a few of the current regional phase 1 permits for MS4s. And so what this would do is improve the cohesiveness across the state of MS4 permit requirements. And so that might increase the minimum measures in some regions and then bring it up to the same level that it already occurs in other regions. So there might be some increased MS4 requirements overall, such as not all regions are required, or not all MS4s in every region are required to implement integrated pest management programs so far.
This is Paul Han. I wanted to provide a little bit more specific response to that. I see two fundamental ways that this program could result in some significant cost savings for the state. The first one has to do with the monitoring. You know, we do a tremendous amount of monitoring. This also would benefit the municipalities, and I think ultimately the citizens of the state of California. We do a tremendous amount of monitoring. In many cases, the monitoring that we have can tell us things that we already know, and through a better ability to collaborate and to have a statewide coordinated framework or region by region coordinated framework, such as what you see going on in the Bay Area with the RMP, the Regional Monitoring Program, or down south with the bite monitoring. You have the opportunity to leverage assets and reduce the total cost of monitoring while improving the amount of information that you get. So that's a huge benefit for us. One of the other issues that we have is TMDLs. If you've been tracking the number of listings that we have, I don't know if you want to talk about that offline. I'd be happy to provide you more information. But we are required to assess our water bodies within the state of California on a periodic basis and determine whether or not those water bodies are meeting the water quality objectives. We did do a little bit of a review for it in advance of this scoping meeting and some other meetings that we've had, and we see the number of pesticide exceedances increasing. Now, I want to be clear about this because it's not necessarily that there's necessarily more pesticides in the environment. In many cases, it's simply that the monitoring that we have has been better assessed, or it provides better information. And so there's a lot of different reasons why that number of pesticide listings could be going up. But at the end of the day, what we have is between pesticides and the other different impairments that we have literally thousands of impairments. And each one of those, theoretically, could require a TMDL. And if we took those TMDLs on a one-by-one basis, those are amazingly expensive. A TMDL can take, one or two staff up to 10 years to develop. That's a huge cost. So by looking at this as a statewide level and trying to figure out how we might implement this as an alternative to a TMDL, we do a couple of really important things. The first thing that we do is we have the opportunity to deal with pesticides as a class as opposed to individual one-off TMDLs, and there's a huge potential cost savings associated with that. The other thing that we do is we potentially set up a framework. You know, one of the things that we've been interested in doing at the state board is to figure out how we can leverage regional board expertise at a statewide level, and how to take these the learning that we've gathered doing the individual TMDLs and leverage those to a statewide program. And so this is another one of the projects where we're expanding our learning and expanding our knowledge base to be able to do things more efficiently and quicker. Does that help you out?
Thanks, Paul.
This is Tom. I want to add one more thing, because I think it's important recognizing our partners from the Department of Pesticide Regulation are here. And the good news is that they already have a very well-founded urban pesticide program. But that said, they have their own staff limitations. So one benefit of this approach is that through a coordinated effort, we could be more strategic in partnering our staff resources where their staff resources for the greater good. Otherwise, they're having to react. So this gives us an opportunity to collaborate and be more proactive. And I think, and another benefit that I see is that rather than reacting on a pesticide by pesticide basis, we're establishing a framework to look at pesticide use in general in terms of what types of pest problems and pest applications tend to be the more challenging relative to threat to water quality, and we'll look for mechanisms working with DPR to manage the overall manage pests as a whole, as well as the types of pesticides, rather than each active ingredient being considered independent. I mean, we're not talking about superseding rules and authorities that they already are obligated to implement, but there's clearly some additional benefit by looking strategically about urban use patterns that result in water quality problems and helping us set priorities and partner with DPR. So there's that economic benefit as well. And certainly, we already mentioned, by coming up with a consistent permitting approach, we save the cost of having to develop regional and municipal specific permit requirements, because it all adds up. All that staff time adds up. So this is all around look for economy of scale benefits of collaborative efforts and partnering and sharing resources.
Thanks. Any other questions around the room? Comments? All right, well, thank you all for coming, and oh, sorry, one more thing from Paul.
So I think I'm happy to hear the number of comments. I would like to say that, you know, one of the things that we are trying to do with the whole storms program is to develop a more collaborative approach to dealing with our regulations and our control activities. I would encourage you guys to talk to your colleagues. We're very interested in being able to outreach to the various stakeholder groups. I don't know, is there anyone from the environmental community here? Okay.
They're on the webcast.
They're on the webcast. Well, environmental community, we are very interested in talking to you. Certainly we're interested in talking to the other stakeholders. We've done a pretty good job up to date. There are some holes that we need to fill, and we would like to invite you guys to come talk to us, and we're happy to hear from you. Thank you.
And once again, we invite public comments on the CEQA scoping document in this presentation, and we have information on how to submit those online. All right, thank you.